Okay, first of all, thank you all for turning up. It's a really good turnout. And I'd like to introduce you to the speakers. Andrew, I'm sure most of you know. This is Neil Petrie, who's sort of my partner in crime, shall I? And this is Nigel. And we're taking in turns, we'll let them all speak, and then we'll have a question and answer. So if you've got any questions, write them down as they're talking, and then you can answer the question. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Neil Petrie.
Thank you, John. I'll press the button. Hold it. I don't know you'd be talking to someone.
Yeah, press it down.
Well done. Yeah. It's always technical stuff, isn't it? Anyway, if you're here for the drag queen show, that's next Tuesday. Right, so get that right. Right, okay, thank you all for coming. Obviously, we're very pleased to see so many people here. We expected about 6, so thanks a lot for turning up. But this was the cheapest place we could get. Right, now, I'll be talking on strategy as far as direct democracy is concerned and the movement. And then we'll be talking with Nigel, talking about the tactical side of it, because he's come up from Bridgen today. The aim being that he'll be explaining how about a year ago we started really a lot of movement down there and how that's progressing and the methods he's used and the way it's working to get people involved and motivated, and they're very highly motivated. So I'd like to, obviously, we've got to look at where we are in the world now, and we know the situation is not good at all. And obviously, we're stuck with an old system that is controlled from very high up, beyond this country, as we all know. So I was out with Andrew the other day, we were doing the knocking, and some bloke came along on his bike. And this fella recognised Andrew and says, starts talking. And Andrew just said, the first thing he said to him, he says, "How awake are you?" Because this is the point. And this guy's, I'm quite awake, I watch GB News. So it's a start, isn't it? But this is, you've got the awake against the woke almost, and the woke and all the other ones who hang around in that world, as it were. So we've got a real issue, and the problem is, we've got to, how do you break through this control by the parties and the lack of consultation or control by the people, okay? Because we're supposed to be in a democracy, but we're not, are we? We're in a representative system. It's an entirely different thing. So what we're trying to do is to explain really about strategy in terms of, I'm an ex-military bloke, so we look at things, how you look at it from the top, and then you talk about tactics, how you actually fight the battles on the ground, because you've got to win them. You get all great strategy, but I just want to explain that the movement is basically aimed at getting a Swiss-style system. So it's a democracy where it's a hybrid, you can call it. You've got 2 elements. You've got the representatives that go in there that you will elect, but they're all under our control, because every single piece of legislation that comes out of Parliament, you'll have the opportunity, if you think it's important enough, to go out and get people to support you to stop that bit of legislation or to amend it. This has been going for 175 years, for those of you who don't know, so it's a clear system where it's a defensive system, you might say, where you've got control of the political class. Now, the offensive one is where you have the initiative, they call it, where anyone here can come up with some idea. It might be something to do with, sovereign people and common law. You can put forward ideas, okay? And if you can persuade enough people to back you, you can then have another referendum. And they're first past the post referendums. And these are not unusual things in Switzerland. They're about 4 times a year they're voting. Okay, it's very straightforward. It's just part of the process. And a postal vote thing will drop through their door. They can fill it in and take it down, to the voting booth about 4 times a year. But if you want to take control, that's the sacrifice you're going to have to make. You're going to do something to get control of these people. And they've been doing it, as I've said, for nearly 2 centuries. All right? And the difference is, we've got 96%, is it, of our GDP as a debt. That's the level we're at. That's the level we've got, the rate. Theirs is 40 and going down. Okay? It's a completely different society, and the MPs are only working 12 weeks of the year. That's all they do. They're only getting paid a daily rate. They're not getting a load of allowances. So it's a system where the people control Parliament, the people control the parties. I mean, we always say, can you name anyone here, please name a famous Swiss politician, anybody? Silence, you see, none. No one can, I've never found it, I don't even know it. You know, I've been looking at that place for years. So I don't know any. And this is what we need, is where they're taking orders from us. Okay, and you know, that's what we thought we had. Nearly 1 million blokes dead in World War One, another few 100,000 in World War Two. So we'd have the say over this country. That's what they did it for, wasn't it? Not so that we could hand it over to a bunch of landed gentry still and others. So our strategy was to go out and get as many people as possible involved to get the word out there, because not many people know much about direct democracy. That's the reality. So that's what we've been really aiming for at the start. And you know, in the military you talk, 6 words will cover everything you can ever think of in your whole life. It's called the master principle of strategy. And it's the selection and maintenance of the aim. What's your aim in life and how you're going to maintain your focus on it. That's it. Everything else follows from that. You don't have a clear aim, you're not going to win a war. Have we been winning wars lately? No. People don't understand strategy. It's as simple as this. But we do, you know, that's what we've been working on. And the aim behind that for us is obviously to get this system in place, this Swiss-style system where you'll control everything. That's how it's going to work. It's working now. This is not some pipe dream, you know, and you can all see the video of Nigel talking about direct democracy, and he reckons that it's the best governed country in the world, Switzerland. And he's not alone in that. Best education system because the people run it. Every canton, the education system is controlled by the people. 26 different cantons, they're counties you call them, and they've all got their own education system. So this is what we need to be doing. We need to take control. We've never had control. They say take back control. We never really had it. But at least they're a bit more decent 30, 40 years ago, a lot of the politicians, because they, you know, they were pretty much similar to us all of them. That's gone. That's long gone, as you all know. So how are we going to take on, you know, the WEF, the WHO, the UN, and all these people? Because, you know, you've got to work from the bottom up. This is why we were again talking on tactics and how we take control at the lower level. But what I'll say to you is the second important rule of strategy is that you've got maintenance of morale. You know, that you've got people inspired to do something. We're not going to win this if we're on our back feet and retreating. Not going to happen. You've got to believe in what we're doing. And this is what you'll find with this chart that you've all got there. This is like, for us, it's like the battle winner. This is the T34 of this campaign. You know, this is how we're going to go out and win. To explain to people how simple this system is. But Nigel will talk more about that for you. Now, other things we've got to think about in terms of maintenance of morale, in terms of having the right spirit to go out and win. We've got to think about having allies. We're all different groups. We've got the independence for direct democracy. We've got reform. We've got independence. We've got to look at how we pull together to make this work. Because, you know, we can make it work, and it's a very popular process when people understand it. But if we don't go out and explain it, we don't get out there and get the people on board, then we're not going to win. And we'll be stuck there in the same position for the next round. We'll have Labour in, obviously, and then after that, what we're going to have? Complete disaster. Martial law, who knows what they'll be doing? We don't know what's going to go on, but as you saw with the WHO getting the right now to, or looking like they may have the right to call out emergencies over all of us. And you've got Scotland with its hate speech laws. How are you going to control them? These are real issues, and they're all legal. They're all about legislation. So, you know, we need to take control, and we can only do that through having a process like the Swiss have got, where you have the right to call for referendums on any piece of legislation, and you've got the right to put forward legislation that you think will help, you know, everybody in this country. So, that's really what I wanted to explain briefly for you, so you understand where we're going. I'll just repeat the aim again, is to have a Swiss-style direct democracy where you're in control through the use of referendums on any piece of legislation coming out, and you can put forward any idea that you wish through the same process. And this is done, as I say, 4 times a year in Switzerland already. So you'll have this responsibility to actually control things, but you'll be in charge. You know, we've got to get off the back feet, and we've got to be going forward at them. And we're going to have a lot of opposition. That is the case. We can't deny that. But we've got appeal. the point is, just yesterday, there was an article, or the day before maybe now, one of the famous journalists is Matt
Goodman.
Yeah, Matt Goodwin. Yeah, he put an article out saying about the requirement that he thought that if Rishi Sunak put out a referendum, okay, this is what he's saying, if he had put a referendum out on immigration, that's how he could possibly increase the kind of score for the Conservatives. Well, I think that's telling you all how important people see referendums, how the appeal that they hold. Whereas I'm saying, no, go out and tell them you have a system where you can do this all the time. So that's the appeal. Okay? If you don't have that, you'll be stuck, behind Rishi Sunak and Starmer forever. So what I'm trying to get over is that we need to understand that the people can take control. They have done this in another country, and they run it. Okay, and they have very high salaries compared to us, twice ours. Their national debt, as I explained, is much, much lower, and they're in control. And it's a country that people would love to go and move to, but they can't. It's not easy, because immigration is highly controlled by the people of Switzerland. Do we have that? No, not a hope. We have none of that. So this is how we should think about it. If you want to take control and save this country, because it's going into dark places, as I think many of you know, then we need to get control. So I'll leave you with those thoughts, but the strategic aim should hopefully be clear to you all now, and the part you can all play in this, pulling together as allies and working together to get the system in place, then that's the aim. Don't lose sight or get egos in the way. Let's get out there and pull together and make it work. Okay, thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Nigel Furness, and he's going to tell you about what they're doing down south.
Hello everyone, excuse my appearance, but I have very severe light issues, optic nerve issues. It's not to make me look sinister, although it does tend to send a shudder through the spines of those collectively assembled in Brighton Town Hall. I'm not bothered about that. I quite relish it, in fact. But yeah, let's get back onto what Neil was saying there just then about Rishi obviously will be losing out to Starmer. Now, yes, a terrible prospect, but equally a good prospect, because I look at things that the fact that people, the electorate, are prepared to flip so readily. An 83-seat majority for Boris, the red wall up in this neck of the wood, that was one on the back of UKIP's hard work. I was a kipper, he was a kipper. I was the agent for Brighton and Hove for UKIP. What an absolute joy that was. We didn't win the vote in Brighton and Hove, but I made a prediction before there was all the assembled press, because of course Caroline Lucas, being the one and only Green MP, and of course the press all came out and said, well, you're all going to be wasting your time, because I can tell you right now, the court of Queen Caroline will be in recess this evening, because I said, Caroline may be many things, but not stupid enough to stand here on this platform next to me and taste the bitter taste of defeat. I said, because we have won the referendum. You can imagine the uproar, the furor that there was. It was a different matter later in the day, when in actual fact I had the great pleasure of doing two things I'd never had the pleasure of before, standing on a public platform I have been doing for the best part of 60 years, believe it or not. 1964, yes, at the age of 14. I'd never stood on one alone, the only person on that platform. I never stood, believe it or not, on a victorious platform, because I've always been, some say perhaps 10 or 20 years ahead of my time. I say I'm too blunt, and this is why I'm loving being up here in Yorkshire. The first time I properly stopped in Yorkshire, because what I love about Yorkshire folk, and northern folk in general is that they speak their minds. If there's something to say, they say it. And haven't we just proved this with what's happened to Boris's red wall majority? Of course Starmer's going to win it, but let me tell you this, we have other plans. We will start persecuting the minute that man sets foot in number 10. I'll give you a very, very quick, because you don't want to hear me go on, you want to hear about the tactics. Well, here are the tactics in Brighton. Thank God for Caroline Lucas. I bet nobody here will give 3 cheers to Caroline Lucas. And can you imagine why I'm saying that? Because Caroline Lucas, yes, that's when all this green agenda started. Boris, the so-called Tories, I'm sure Andrew might agree with me there, carried away with their desire to be seen, to be greener than green. Well, we had the real thing. First and foremost, we had in 1996, when the 2 towns of Brighton and Hove merged, we had what they called a shadow election. The shadow election elected the ones who would take over at the end of the 3-year term in 1999. Elected to that was a guy called Pete West. He's still there on the council. He was this country's, can you believe this, 1996, first Green councillor. 15 years later, the Green Party was running Brighton and Hove Council. There were 54 councillors in Brighton. The Greens had a clear majority. Guess what? That enabled them to portray themselves in their real colours. There's no hiding once you're in power. And this is the point, you know, I began life as a communist, would you believe? And I had on my wall, yes, you can all shoot me now if you want, a quote from Chairman Mao: "Dare to struggle, dare to win." That's what it's all about. And people think all this nonsense about Keir Starmer has an unassailable lead in the polls. Polls are one thing. Again, Andrew might agree, it's what people tend to put in the ballot box. That's the real and only poll. And if you're unafraid, and this man, an incredibly brave man, most certainly is prepared to go up and pump the flesh, prepared to stand up for his principles, and for what we all in this room, I would imagine, agree 100%. This man will be returned to power. This is the start of a new trend. Keir Starmer will get into power. For a start, there's no money. Promises, promises. Notice not Angela Rayner, the other one. Yes.
Reeves.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Reeves. Now, we're not prepared to make any promises that haven't been costed. Well, there's a first for a start. There's not a thing they're going to be able to do. The state of the economy was dire anyway. COVID, we all, I hope, within these walls know, was a deliberate attempt to wreck the economies of the old European powers. That's what it was. Be under no illusion. This is to do with globalism, and that to me is a filthy word. Well, yes, thank you. We have still, and I really don't need to tell you in this part of the world, 500 years at least of coal beneath our very feet. How many centuries of oil and natural gas, and not only the North Sea, further and further out into the Atlantic. Here we are with the cost of living crisis, which has led to rampant inflation, a thing that people were foolish enough to think they'd seen the last of. And remember those days, of course, of zero interest that would last forever. Yes, and I am absolutely ashamed to say that I was completely behind a home-owning democracy. In fact, it was me that came up with the idea, again, shoot me all now if you want, with selling council houses to their tenants at a discount. One half of my family came totally from council houses. And how I based that was, why shouldn't working people aspire to own their own homes? They shouldn't have to be beholden to any landlord, local authority or private. I was never told in Tory central office, and I'd worked my way up into their think tank, that the plan was not from Margaret Thatcher down, that the plan was to hardly build any more council houses again. I wanted to free people from slavery, the slavery of permanent rent, permanent mortgages, reasonably priced houses, so working people could own the roofs over their own heads. I wanted to go a lot further. That wasn't adopted by the Tory think tank. I wanted not just a shareholding democracy, I wanted workers to have the right, if they wished, to purchase shares in their own companies. Now, think of BL and what became of BL. Yes, most certainly can. Enough of my history lessons. This is where direct democracy comes in, because what we're doing in Bridgen is working with elements in all the parties. We have Labour, Tory, Green, 3 separate lots of independents on the council. The plan is direct democracy is a game that any number of players can participate in. I want to see this party, Independence for Direct Democracy. I want to see an umbrella so that Andrew Bridgen and all these other individual-minded people can work together, reform too, without treading on one another's toes and thereby reducing down the vote. Now, the point is, ask anybody, ask people who are in any political party, can you honestly say you're totally happy with what your party does? They come round, they knock on the door, they make the promises, doesn't matter which one they are. Would you not like to have a means of actually ensuring they do what they say on the tin? The right of recall now has found its way into national law, so we've had a surfeit of by-elections. We're now campaigning, and guess what? I'm collaborating with the Greens, whom my group, the Friends of Brighton and Hove, actually tactically voted. None of us got in. We ensured that the Greens were reduced from the ruling party to just 7 councillors, and 2 of them by 1 single vote, I might add, despite all our hard efforts. Momentum Labour had been, we brought down, the Friends of Brighton and Hove, brought down Momentum Labour, so they had to suspend one of their bent, and that's what they are, bent councillors after another. Then, shock horror, you've let the Greens in again. What do you think of? I said, giving them a second chance, so this time there'll be no return from them. And eventually people might think, okay, we've had enough of the usual suspects. Can we perhaps vote for something like these people here, Andrew Bridgen individually in Leicester? This is how we're working. We're being pragmatic. And now the new Stormright Council's got the first, as a result of all us rebels, the first overall majority that they have had in 20 years. Straight away, they've declared a cabinet system. The Greens, having collaborated with myself and Momentum Labour, guess what? We're calling for a referendum so that we decide, the people decide, do you want a behind closed doors cabinet where there's precious little public participation in questions and supplementary questions? So this is, it's been a long drawn out process. But there is no substitute, politically like anything else, for hard work. We've got to be prepared to say, right, okay, my enemy's enemy is my friend. So this lot aren't doing what we want. We'll get the other dreadful lot back. And the same will be nationally when it comes to Starmer replacing Boris after only 5 years, less than 5 years, it's Sunak now. And again, then you will see there'll be by-election after by-election. Note something to everybody. The shocking number of current members of Parliament who are not seeking re-election. And guess what else? Caroline Lucas has to be top in that list, doesn't she? Just again, she does not want defeat to be anywhere on her CV. So basically, that's just a snapshot of how we do it in Brighton. And people think, oh, silly, softy, Brighton, and Bright's this and Bright's that. Thank God Brighton is a wacky place, because at least people have proven that they're prepared to break the mold. And that's why I was delighted in trepidation too. We've got the Greens in. If people are prepared to go to that extreme, having been true blue since Adam was a lad. So I think basically that's all I've got to say on the issue. And I think, honestly, the only real solution is direct democracy. Because otherwise, my horror is that the authorities are deliberately, am I alone, I wonder, deliberately attempting to provoke civil unrest, the boat people, not least. Oh yeah, we've got them everywhere on the streets of Brighton. My God, refugees, good God, you want to see them, they're better nourished and better dressed, and all the smartphones, obligatory cans of beer, obligatory skunk, the place stinks of skunk. What would the mullahs say about that? There's more to this. They're an army in waiting. I firmly believe it. And I do not want to let us be tempted into an uprising, because I firmly believe they want to clamp down and have martial law and jackboots marching these streets. Now, do you all think I'm mad, or does anybody here tend to agree with what I say? Agreed. Right. Well, I think you've heard enough from me, and I think you want to hear from this very brave man over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I'd like to introduce you to, for those that don't know him, Andrew Bridgen, who is the sitting MP for Leicestershire North West.
Right. Can you hear me at the back? You can. No, we don't need the microphone. So yes, I'm Andrew Bridgen. I'm the independent member of Parliament for North West Leicestershire. I've been elected under the Conservative banner 4 times in my constituency. My constituency is my home, and I think I've always been independent, really. I didn't come through the normal sort of CCHQ route for being an MP. In fact, the Conservative Party told me when I wanted to stand for North West Leicestershire that no Conservative can ever win in that seat. We're not giving you any money, and you're on your own. The council has been Labour since its formation in 1983, and the sitting Labour MP David Taylor was seen as unbeatable. But I'm a local guy, and I was a local businessman as well. It was my home area, and so I put my own money into it. And I had a group of friends. We used to go down to the local pub, and they were all small and medium-sized business owners and entrepreneurs, and they all moaned on a Friday about how bad the area was. Everything's terrible. So I said, well, and it must have been 1 pint of Marston's pedigree too many. And I said, look, every Friday we come here and you're all moaning, nothing's right, the country's going down the tubes. Does all this sound familiar? This is back in 2005. So I said, look, you stand for the council, you stand, you stand, you stand, you stand, you stand, you stand, you stand. I'll put the money into the leaflets. I'll stand for MP, and we'll take over, and we'll sort it all out in North West Leicestershire. And they should really, in the Green Man pub in Clifton Campbell, which is actually just over the border in Staffordshire, there really should be a plaque on the wall, and it should say, the rise of North West Leicestershire and the fall of Gordon Brown started here with Andrew Bridgen and his plotters. And every one of my friends in that pub that night and their partners, they all stood for the council. The local Conservative Association was so moribund, I had 55 members when I became the prospective parliamentary candidate. I ran the local elections in 2007, and the Conservative Party had never put up a full list of candidates. And they've never had a candidate in every ward in the constituencies. And I fell out with the association, ran the campaign myself and funded it myself. And the Conservative Party were rather surprised that you know, if you actually put candidates up in every ward, people might vote for you. So Conservative Central Office were rather surprised when the biggest swing in the country in the local election in 2007 was in a place called North West Leicestershire, where after 40 years of Labour control of the council, we took them down to 5 councillors in one night. David Taylor, the much-loved Labour MP, who was another local guy, but Christian socialist, he wasn't a bad man, and he cried that night, and within 6 months he announced he wasn't going to stand because he was going to lose. And I was gutted in the 2010 election, in the seat that the Conservative Party had said we could never win, that I only had the second biggest swing in the country against Labour, turning a 4,500 Labour majority into 7,500 with a 12.5% swing on the night. Now, North West Leicestershire was the most deprived seat in Leicestershire. We have Colville, which is the most deprived town in Leicestershire. And a previous Conservative MP, many eons ago, had suggested changing the name of Colville. I thought that was a stupid idea, so what I set out to do was to change Colville for the better. So, I had the poorest seat in Leicestershire, and I'm pleased to say that it took me 10 years, and I have the richest seat in Leicestershire. We brought in the previous Labour administration was so corrupt. They used to want 2% out of all planning permissions. There were whole, most architects and businesses did not want to put planning permission in North West Leicestershire. We cleared all those planning officers out, and we cleared out the Labour councillors who were perpetrating that. And North West Leicestershire, I don't know if you know, it's the very centre of population of the UK. 4 hours lorry drive in any direction from North West Leicestershire, which is also Ashby de la Zouch is in my constituency. That's the town furthest from the sea in any direction. So we are Middle England. 4 hours lorry drive from North West Leicestershire, you've got like 83% of all chimney pots in the UK. So if you want a big shed and you want to deliver all over the UK, North West Leicestershire is the place to be. And it just happens that so a third of all the jobs are in distribution or distribution related. We've got the airport, we've got East Midlands Airport, we've got the M1, we've got the M42, we've got the A50, and we are the place that distribution hubs want to come to. We've got more fork trucks and lorry drivers than you could shake a stick at. It just happened, luck would have it, that they have the only MP in North West Leicestershire who's a qualified transport manager, which most of the people in my constituency work in that industry. And we've played to our strengths. We now have 1.2 jobs in the constituency for everyone of working age in the constituency, so we're a net bringer in of businesses. 40% of the top 100 businesses in Leicestershire are in the one seat of Northwest Leicestershire, and my majority increased with the prosperity of the area, so that in the 4 elections I've stood in, I've increased my majority at every single election, my percentage of the vote, my majority and my vote. And at the last election, having led the Leave campaign for the East Midlands and the so-called Get Brexit Done 2019 election, despite there being 6 candidates on the ballot paper, I managed to achieve 63% of the vote in a seat that David Cameron said we could never win. And I was particularly pleased because David Cameron had left the Commons by then, that I actually had a bigger majority than they had in Whitney. But if my seat was a dump, he said my seat was a dump, what a dump the Cotswolds must be. Can't return a big stonking majority. So I'd always been a bit of an independent. They had no hold of me. And within weeks of being elected, I was exposed to the Horizon Post Office scandal with Mr. Rudkin, who's very famous now, the actor playing him, the man who was representing all the sub-postmasters in the UK, went down to Fujitsu's headquarters. They showed him how they were fiddling all the Horizon accounts in all the sub-postmasters' post offices without them knowing, making corrections to errors. He came out of there and he told me this story within weeks of being elected. And it sounded like a conspiracy theory, didn't it? But it had a ring of truth about it. He told me that he was thrown out of Fujitsu's headquarters when they realised who he was. They'd mistaken him for someone else. They'd shown him everything. And he went home, back to Ibstock, where his wife was looking after the post office for him while he was doing these national duties. And he was thinking about what he'd seen and how it contradicted everything that the post office had ever said in court with his members. He went to bed and woke up the next morning, and the post office inspector knocking on the door, and he shouted up to him, "You're £44,000 short overnight and you're going to prison." They had deliberately targeted that man, unless you think it's a coincidence that the day after he uncovered everything that was going on at Fujitsu, the next morning his wife had got a £44,000 and he was ruined. And I saw him about 2 years after that when I was elected, and I saw two broken people in front of me. And I thought, why would they come and tell me? They're convicted criminals. Why would they come and tell me this story? They're raking everything up. They had a previously blemishless track record of honesty. You can't be a sub-postmaster unless you pass all these tests. You can't have a criminal record. What was in it for them? So I started making a few investigations. This is back in 2010. I asked other colleagues in the House of Commons, have you had anybody prosecuted by the Post Office who previously had a blemishless record, who claims that they didn't do it, they didn't take the money? And mysteriously did. We had 5 MPs, and there's only myself and Kevin Jones from Durham who are still left in the Commons from those 5 MPs. The investigator who we managed to get into the Post Office was my man. Ron Warmington, the second site, was my recommendation. You will notice I was written out of the programme, but I ran that campaign. And if you look back in Hansard, 9 years ago, everything that was in that TV programme exposing what Fujitsu and the Post Office had done to the postmasters, it's on the record because I said it in a speech in the House of Commons. So everything that Mr. Rudkin had told me turned out to be 100% true. We had an establishment who'd worked against him. They covered up. The government knew. The Post Office knew. They certainly all knew by 2014. I knew. And equally shockingly, I went to every media outlet in 2014 with the evidence, the BBC, the ITV, Channel 4 News, Sky News, the Telegraph, the Times, all the newspapers, and said, look, run this story. You'll get an award. This is the biggest miscarriage of justice in the UK's history. You'll get an award if you run this story. And to a man and a woman, every one of those journalists quite like the story. They quite like the thought of winning an award. But every one of their head offices, their editors, stop them running the story. And we're seeing that again and again and again. Rotherham, Hillsborough, the vaccine harms, the excess deaths, the net zero, the WHO instruments, all the things I'm talking about in Parliament now that nobody wants to talk about. These are things that are going to affect you, your children, and your grandchildren. And none of these things, the way your Parliament is acting, it's not that it's going to happen. It's not in your interest. They're not looking after your interests. I've realised this. And I remember, I'll remind you again, you've probably heard me say it, that when I spoke out, I realised what was going on with the vaccines. And what pushed me to speak out was that was when the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority put in to vaccinate children down to the age of 6 months. People who are at no risk whatsoever. There's not been a healthy child of that age ever died anywhere in the world from COVID-19. But there was clearly a risk from these experimental vaccines. And I spoke out and got a debate on the 13th of December 2022, and I knew that they'd throw me out the Conservative Party for it. But I knew that I could explain it in a way that even the most pro-vaccine person would realise that there was no risk to those children, that there was a risk, however small they thought it was, from those vaccines we shouldn't be giving them to. Now, I spoke out on the 13th of December. We're now living in one of the very few countries in the world that didn't vaccinate down to 6 months. The government can rubbish what I said. They said I was talking conspiracy theorists, but they didn't dare vaccinate down to 6 months of age in this country. They did in most of the other countries around the world. And if that cost me my political career, then that will be every day of the week, because that's what we're here for. And unfortunately, there are very few colleagues in the House of Commons with the same attitude. The BBC, on the last time they ever interviewed me, they said, "Why are you willing to sacrifice your career on the hill of vaccine harms?" I said, "Because that's the hill you're killing my people on." That's what's going on. And when I spoke out on the 17th of March, using the government's own data from the ONS, on the number needed to vaccinate, known as the NNV, with the autumn booster, which we're giving to everybody. The autumn booster was going out to everybody. It worked out that I think it was the healthy 40 to 49 cohort. You had to vaccinate 934,000 of them, just to keep one, from the government's own figures, keep one person out of reporting into the hospital with COVID-19. And with a severe adverse events rate of 1 in 800, it meant you were going to kill or put into hospital with serious injury 1,150 people just to keep that one person out of hospital with COVID. And that wasn't in intensive care, that was just reporting to hospital saying, "I don't feel very well, I think I've got COVID." And again, the government said Andrew Bridgen spouting his conspiracy theories. But if you look within 3 weeks, they've restricted the booster campaign only to the over 75s. And again, I think that saved lives. The government are not looking after you. Parliament is not looking after you. And that is easily demonstrated by the grandee of the Conservative Party. Before I was actually kicked out, after I'd been suspended, I had a meeting with them. I explained for an hour and a half my concerns over the vaccine harms, the use of midazolam and morphine on the vulnerable elderly, NICE guideline 163, which I believe was responsible for euthanizing tens of thousands of people who were moved out of hospital to make way for the expected first wave of COVID patients, who never came, by the way. The hospitals were empty. They never came. But that created the first wave. And after an hour and a half of this, the grandee listened. And I knew this person I was speaking with was speaking for the party. And I also knew that his sister had had to go into hospital after the second Pfizer vaccine. I didn't tell him any of this, but that is what had happened. He knew everything. And he turned to me at the end of the meeting, well, it became the end of the meeting, when he turned to me and said, "Andrew, there is currently no political appetite for your views on the vaccines. There may well be in 20 years' time, and you're probably going to be proved right then. But in the meantime, you need to bear in mind that you're taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world, with all the personal risk for you which that will entail." And I said, "Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm leaving the meeting now." I guess that's the end of it. And they expelled me from the Conservative Party for that. So I wouldn't cover it up. Look at what's been, this has all been done to you before. The thalidomide crisis. Thalidomide was suspended in 1961. 60% of the babies, pregnant women who took it, the babies died. 40% were born with horrendous disabilities. It was 1972 before the word thalidomide was allowed to be mentioned in the chamber of the House of Commons, and compensation was obtained for those victims, who the children were 11, 12, 13 years old by then. And I looked at the ruling from the Strasbourg Court of Human Rights, and it actually said in that 3 judges had come to the conclusion that successive speakers of the House of Commons had deliberately suppressed debate on thalidomide for 11 years. And I got the first ever debate in any parliament on excess deaths in the world. It took me 26 attempts in the House of Commons to get it. And it was only when I sent the video pointing out that previous speakers had been accused of suppressing debate on thalidomide, a week later I got a debate on excess deaths from Lindsay Hoyle on the 20th of October last year. We've had another debate in Westminster Hall for 90 minutes. I managed to get 17 colleagues to come to that. I've now got 24 signed up for a 3-hour debate. We won't get 3 hours, then it'll allow us 3 hours in the main chamber on the 18th of April, in a few weeks' time. The truth is coming out. they're not going to get 20 years cover up on this. They're not going to get 20 months. But all the political parties are a party to it. They've all got massive political capital tied up in this. They don't want anything breaking before the general election. I think they're going to have to be disappointed, because the truth is like a lion. We don't have to protect it. All we have to do is set it free, and we're going to set it free. And I'll set it free on the 18th of April. And if that was all it was, just the vaccines, but it's not. Oh, your parliament and every parliament around the world is going to sign its people away, your sovereignty, to the WHO, the World Health Organization, an unelected, unaccountable, non-tax-paying, immune from prosecution organisation. So they will be able to call it a public health emergency of international concern, or the pandemic, for animal pathogens, human pathogens, or a perceived threat to the environment, anywhere in the world, or the risk of any of those things, just a precautionary risk, so we'll just lock you down for a bit. They're looking at vaccines, mRNA vaccines, in 100 days. They'll be completely untested, working on the same system we're working on now, with the same side effects, and they will have the ability to mandate them. They won't say they're not obligatory, but you won't be able to go out the house unless you have one, or go to work, or travel, or see your friends. I mean, this is absolute lunacy. It's an abdication of responsibility. This is your sovereignty that your elected representatives will be giving away. I don't hold your sovereignty. Your sovereignty has to be returned to you at every election, so you can decide who you want to represent you. It's not for politicians to give this away. We could never, the powers that the WHO will have make being in the European Union, and I was a big Brexiteer, look like a paragon of virtue of democracy compared to the WHO. This is autocratic dictatorship. Bear in mind, there is not one court anywhere in the world where if Dr. Tedros, the Director General of the WHO, made a decision you didn't like, or I didn't like, or anybody around the world didn't like, there is no court anywhere in the world where we could go and say and hold him to account, because that is the level of immunity they have. This is dictatorship. It's so dangerous, and the whole world is sleepwalking into it. That's another thing that my parliament and all the parliaments around the world don't want to talk about. I'm always suspicious when politicians don't want to talk about something. There's something going on. I can guarantee it's not going to be in your interest or your interest or my interest. And this is coming fast. So at the end, I think it's 26th of May, the international, the treaty called the Pandemic Agreement now, which we've never agreed to, that will probably get a vote by both houses of our Parliament, the Commons and the Lords. That's going to go through. Labour are going to back it, the Conservatives are going to back it. They don't want anyone to read the detail. It's horrendous, giving these powers away. And even more concerning, the amendments to the international health regulations, where they've taken out everything to do with human rights. These are United Nations human rights. The WHO is an arm of the United Nations. And in that, they've actually taken out all the human rights, and it's replaced by a bland statement saying everybody will be treated with equity. The same. Well, yeah, and if we're treating everyone badly, that's equity, isn't it? And that's what it's going to be. We won't even get a vote on that. We won't even get a vote on it. And the only things we've actually had is 2 public petition debates in our Parliament. One on the pandemic agreement, which got 156,000 supporters. One about 116,000 for the amendments to the international health regulations. We've had those two debates. And there was a third debate, which I raised in the chamber only a few weeks ago, where the motion was moved with, I think, 104,000 public petition that we should leave the WHO. Well, of course we should.
Yeah.
And the petitions committee in the House of Commons decided that we're not going to have a debate on something, despite it having 100,000 qualifying for a debate in the House of Commons. Democracy is from the Greek. Demos is the people, and kratos is power. What we have in this parliament and the parliaments around the world is certainly not democracy. We can stop what's going on, and I think we can. I think we will. I do not want to be in a position where this can ever be inflicted upon you or me or my children or my grandchildren ever again. And the answer to that is to move to a system. It's going to be a bind. You're going to have to vote in referendums 3 times a year. But the alternative is we don't want to ever end up in the situation we find ourselves now. And when we've sorted it, we're going to sort it properly. And the answer is going to be direct democracy, and that will be power to the people. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. We're now going to have a question and answer session. If we could ask questions through the chair, if you would, just to make sure we're not all talking at once. So I'll throw that open for the meeting. That gentleman there.
If I go around the
One moment, please.
All right. What have the Swiss done about the vaccines? I mean, have they all taken the vaccines the same as everyone else, or what? I mean,
What have the Swiss done about vaccines?
I don't know that much about it. I'll have to find out from my good friend Philip Crusade, who's also I've spoken with him in 7 countries so far about the WHO treaties. They've got what, 36 cantons. They've got devolved government. I think the best chance we've got is in Switzerland, but it's also very telling that all these organisations who are at the centre of all this, they are actually based in Switzerland. There's been a bit of a rot in Switzerland. So you've got the UN based in Geneva, you've got the WHO based in Geneva, you've got Bill Gates's vaccine promoting organisations, Gavi, and you've got CEPI, all these things that he funds. And what I would say is that there is some bad things going on in Switzerland, because Switzerland has given everyone who works at all of those organisations the diplomatic immunity around the world from prosecution. And I would ask you to say, these are organisations that are supposed to be doing fantastic works for humanity around the world. United Nations, WHO, Gavi, CEPI. Why do they need immunity from prosecution when they're doing such great works for us? But every single one's got it, and they've got it in Geneva. So there's a lot to be done.
Yeah, there's a group, I think it's one of the sons of the founder of the WEF.
Pascal Majadi,
Yeah.
he's a friend of mine.
Yeah, there we go. And he's taken them, he's put a case forward to take them for genocide, I believe it is, because he's got real injuries himself from this. I think his mother passed away due to it as well. So the Swiss have got people who are battling it as well. So it's not perfect. But the bottom line is, the system allows you to get a lot more pushback. As I say, you can defend yourself, or you can go on the attack using the 2 different methods in direct democracy. But the Swiss have been, they had their issues with the start of it. But of course, they'll be learning better than us, because they can still do something quicker now. They've seen it once. The next time around, they will have learned. I mean, that's what will happen with us as well. I don't think anybody expected the level of, criminality that we've been seeing with this. It's unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, I think we've all been a bit blindsided over the years, and we've not really realised how little power we've got. Or, 30 years ago, you had a bunch of MPs who had free speech, and they spoke up. They were more independent, as it were, within the parties. But that's all gone now. They're much more conformist. There's not many Andrews around, are there? You don't see it. There's very few. And how many people do you see standing up with Andrew at the start when he was there? The hall was empty, wasn't it? When he stood up to make his point in Parliament, the place was empty.
They were also making a point.
Sorry?
They were also making a point. They weren't going to listen.
Yeah, they
I bet they watched it later, though.
Yeah, that's it on Switzerland anyway.
Can I add to that? When we already did a referendum in this country in the Leave debate, and there was a chance to go to a public meeting or meet people on the street and ask questions. So Neil's completely right. They can learn quicker when they've got direct democracy, and then you can actually have these public debates, and things can come up in the debate, and they can put things in the newspapers. There can be all the propaganda as well, don't get me wrong, but it's a fair and free chance to find out all the facts before we make a vote on the actual thing.
And also, of course, the Swiss have come under huge pressure over decades to join the European Union. They've had referendum after referendum after referendum, but very wisely, the Swiss always vote to stay out, don't they?
I'll pass the mic around, because then they can pick it up on the recording that we're doing, if that's all right.
Hello, I just have a question about that.
Switched on.
My point is that Pascal Najadi had to go to the States, didn't he, to sue the Swiss government. So how does that equate with the method of independent, direct democracy? But he has to go to America to sue the Swiss government for his injuries.
I understood that he went to Switzerland first. I didn't hear this about going to America. I presume it was probably what Andrew's been saying about this being these international agreements that they are diplomatically, immune from prosecution. That's all I can imagine. So I can't answer it fully. But that's what I would think. But he certainly went to the Swiss first.
Hello, my name's Sam Lee. I'm standing in Hartlepool as an independent candidate. I stood in the by-election in 2019 when this fellow was missing. I'll be standing against him in the general election this time in my hometown. I just wondered, Andrew, what is the top 3 things that you're standing on as an independent? Obviously the by-election was 2021 for me, and it was the height of lockdowns. Obviously I wasn't wearing masks, I was against the vaccine, I was against all the legislations and everything, which was clear from me standing. But it wasn't those things that were going to win me the vote, and I come 3rd out of 16 of them, including this party. And I just wondered, what you'd be standing on this time. You talk about local issues, and I think that's the thing that wins us. We can talk about politicians' direct democracy, we can talk about the vaccine, but at the end of the day, it's local things that make a difference, and that's what we need to come together on as community and giving people their own power. And like I say, I just wondered what you would be standing on as your main points.
Well, it's not surprising. I mean, I would say to the average voter who is not necessarily fully woken up to the vaccine harms, but that's going to be, we're not having an election until October, and I don't think we will have one before October. By the way, we can't have one while the Americans are having theirs, so it won't be November. If we don't have it in October, it's going to be December. So we'll see on that. And immigration, this uncontrolled immigration, we were, North West Leicestershire voted to leave. I led the Leave campaign for the East Midlands. We voted 61% in North West Leicestershire to leave. We're taking back control of our money, our borders, and our laws. We haven't done any of those things. We've certainly not got control of our borders, and without control of our borders, we can't have a country, and we can't have a health service that can provide services free at the point of need. You can't have a benefit system if you're open to the world. You can't have one of those things. And it's not an accident that of all the migrants in our hotels in Leicestershire, and there are 7 constituencies in Leicestershire, the current very kind government we've got in Westminster put 51% of them are in my seat. But the good news is that by July I've got every single hotel shut down. We won't have any in North West Leicestershire. So I'm pretty pleased with that.
He doesn't seem to come up to tackle the issues of exactly the same thing. I don't know where he thinks he's going to stop votes in Hartlepool, but I've tackled a few of those things myself, and that is an important thing to us, to people, even though Hartlepool's the last place. We're obviously high up in the northeast, and it's the last place they're going to migrate.
I always have a soft spot for those monkey hangers.
Thank you. Just expand on that. That one issue was immigration.
Immigration.
Any other 2 other key issues?
Yeah, well, I think by the time we get to the general election, most people know that the vaccines are hurting people. A survey out in January in America, over half of all Americans thought that the vaccines had killed a lot of people. And one of the reasons I've pushed on the vaccine harms and the excess deaths is, it doesn't matter how, the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, supposedly fiddle the figures. Ultimately, we all know people who've been harmed or died prematurely because of the vaccines, because very sadly It's not slowing down, and they can massage the figures how they want to, but they can't hide the bodies, unfortunately, and that's going to be a huge issue. I think there are a number of threats that face us all over the next few months. There's the prospect of a financial collapse of the fiat money system around the world. You'll notice that gold has now hit a new record. I wouldn't be cheering too much. It could mean we're heading into a war with Russia, which we really want to keep out of. I mean, we're actually at war with Russia now. They're just lying to you. They haven't told you. I had a meeting 4 weeks ago with the Russian ambassador. I got plastered for that because no one talks to him. I went and saw him in Kensington Palace Gardens. At number 13 is his residency. Andrei Kilin is his name. Very reasonable man. He said, we know. He said, we know that your troops, your contractors, British contractors, are firing those Storm Shadow missiles at us from Ukraine. So we know you're doing it. We know that there's no way the Ukrainians could fire that missile system. It's causing us a few problems. We also talked about the F-16s, which are going in next month, which I think will be the flashpoint, the most dangerous flashpoint. He said, we know. The F-16s are a fourth generation fighter. They're very good. Not as good as the latest stuff we've got, but they're very good F-16s. They can carry nuclear weapons, which is worrying. He said, but there's only 3 airports, runways that are long enough and flat enough in Ukraine for them to fly out. He says, and we can take care of those. He says, but then when they start flying out of Poland or Germany or Hungary or Romania and bombing our troops in Ukraine, he says, then we're going to bomb those runways in those countries, and says, and then we'll be at war with you. And that is the danger that we're going to. So that's what we're being pushed in, engineered to by people who are in Europe. The EU are already selling war bonds for the war with Russia. Are you aware of this? Institutions are already investing in the war. And if we're not careful, there'll be so much money on the side of we want to have a war, but I can guarantee you there's no winners in this room. Nobody in this room is going to win over having a war with Russia.
So I think I'm jumping the queue. Just expanding on that point and coming back to what our brave lady over here who puts her name on a ballot paper and gives people an option. You've given immigration and the vaccine harms. That's not an easy political message to get across when you're looking for somebody to give you a vote. You mentioned the Russia in the conflict, which we've all had shoved down our throats for 2 years when they decided they didn't want to talk about COVID anymore. And again, I think that's a really big issue. An anti-war, an anti-conflict message, I think, is a really one that will resonate with the vast majority of people.
And I will sit on my record as I've been the MP for 14 years. North West Leicestershire, I told you, was the poorest seat in Leicestershire when I was elected. We're now the richest. I'll give you a few stats. North West Leicestershire is the only part of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland with above average UK salaries. It was the happiest place to live in the Midlands in 2019, handily just before the 19 election, and we haven't diminished for that. And my seat has the highest economic growth in the United Kingdom. Happy people, contented people who are doing it, they vote for the status quo. I'm hoping they'll vote for me because I'll look after them.
I've actually got a couple of short questions. One for Neil and the guys from the Direct Democracy Movement. So the first, I'd really like to know how you're going to get the message out there, because capturing people's attention, the average person has got the attention span less than a fish, right? How are we going to get them? How are we going to get that message into their social media feeds 30 times a day until it's in there? It's the only way to get through to some of these people. How are we going to, if it's impossible to get on the mainstream media because there's absolutely no way they're going to want to know, right? How are we going to do that? So I'd really like to hear some concrete tactics there. And my second follow-up question was just a little one for Andrew, if I may. Andrew, will you be open at any time to asking the question in Parliament about the origins of COVID? Because we're talking about the vaccine, and that's true, but it's quite clear to most of us it was a bioterrorist attack. And I'd really, really like that to be raised.
Yeah, Dylan, you're the AI expert, so I was hoping you'd give me the answers to that question about how we're going to get the message out. No, I'm joking, but, you know, we've got to get people from all the different groups who are independent, or for, you know, the large independent group you might say around is Reform. Now, you don't have to like Tyson, I'm no fan. However, they have a lot of independent thinking people who are standing. Yeah. This is the point. Reform does not have a whip. There's no one to tell them all exactly what they've got to do. Now, I've been having conversations with senior people within that organisation in terms of making clear to them the benefits of direct democracy. And there's a lot of guys here tonight from that organisation who support what we're putting forward. We're an independent group, we're not party aligned. And whoever wants to push direct democracy, they get our support. So what we're trying to do is to persuade Reform, basically, if they can adopt it, and they've got hundreds of MP candidates and hundreds of councillor candidates, and on all of those leaflets going around the country, come election time, there could be tens of millions of leaflets talking about direct democracy. As you know, a year ago, how many thousands of people in this country knew about direct democracy, Swiss style? Not many, let's be frank. So we've been trying to push this, you know, forward, but we've got to find parties. Are the Tories going to do it? No, they're not. As you say, are the press going to do it? No, they're not. You know, so we've got to
might end up being the influencers.
Yeah, that's what we're after. It's always been after the influencers. That's why I went down to GB News one night, driven down there by a mate from London, and we waited outside, and out came for a fag break Nigel Farage. And I had my book with me, and I walked over, and I ambushed him outside while he was just starting to puff. And we had about a 3-minute conversation while I gave him the book. Well, just earlier this month, Nigel Farage down in Tiverton came out and said there are 3 things he wants to change as far as, you know, the reform that he would see coming up in the future. 3 of them. And he said, House of Lords, that can go, that needs reform. Finished, thank you very much. Proportional representation, because he wants people to be more, you know, the parties would be sort of the right size as well. But then the Swiss have that, they have proportional representation. But proportional representation is a sham, really. It doesn't do much. But what does do it was what he said, the third thing. He said, I want a Swiss-style direct democracy. Because he understands that's how you get control for the people. I mean, he's missed a referendum after all, isn't he? So what we're working on now is to get Nigel, Tyson, the other senior guys within Reform to go for this. And then we'll have hopefully tens of millions of people and independent groups. You know, obviously we support Andrew fully. He's an MP. He's come out backing direct democracy. He's the only one who's done so far. But you know, if you've got all of the people who are, you know, going to vote in that, you know, constituency, you've got to vote for Andrew. You know, that's it. It's as simple as that. He's the brave guy who stood up. You know, I told you about morale, and the first thing that guarantees everything is courage. That's it. If you haven't got the courage, you're finished. You get steamrolled. Okay, and that's what Andrew has demonstrated. You know, with stilts, isn't it? Who else? There's 650 odd of these crooks in there, and there's one bloke standing up. That's it. I don't mind saying it on camera. That's my feelings. I was military as well, like Andrew. So the whole affair has been, you know, everything we're seeing is a sham. NATO is a front for the military-industrial complex in America. They've been flogging tens of millions of, you know, tens of billions, so tens of billions, hundreds of billions, in their various wars, and that money goes back, of course, to the United States. How are the Ukrainians paying for it? If you've seen Robert F. Kennedy talking, who's running for president, decent guy. Good man. Yeah, good man. He's explaining that all of those monies going out to Ukraine, 100 billion here, 50 billion there, whatever it is, going straight back to America to pay for the military-industrial complex guys, the Lockheeds and all the rest of them, to get paid for all that equipment that is going to Ukraine. I know, they can't pay it, so how do they pay it off? It's a loan. So how do they pay off? You have to give them the land. The richest farmland on the planet. Superb black soil, famous as the breadbasket of Europe. That's how it's getting paid. So we've got to get the message out there. We've got to get the message out through, you know, hopefully Reform coming on board across the board. Not a few guys, not some here, some there. We haven't got the money, you know. Look where we're meeting. This cost us 30 quid. We had to put a hand down, you know, ask for some support. I'm only joking, but you know, we're not loaded with money. But you know, we can fight effectively. You know, there's lots of people who start with a few people and they grow, and that's what we need because we've got the message. It's about the idea of direct democracy that you can fight back. My book that I sell here tonight, by the way, it's going for tenner, but it's there, and it explains this one vote away, us taking control. Because in the end, if everybody understands that if we go for that system, it's got appeal, which is why Andrew's smart enough to understand it, the reform guys here tonight, they're smart enough to understand it. You've got people who will vote for this across the board. Believe me, you know that's why we're pushing it. The aim is to have you and all those people, all of you here, please push that message out there and get the reform guys to understand that they could be the way we force this change. We haven't got many other options, are there? Yeah. There you go. Thank you very much. Tenner.
I'll just add to that as well. This is a new thing for us in this country. What Neil said there, we don't know what that's going to look like. So we can do this ourselves. We can make it up as we go along. Yeah. And what works, the good practice, we can share. Yeah. And we've got a tool to do it. So you don't even need to be elected, which seems to be a barrier in a lot of people's mind, that we've all got to be the elected person and say that we're standing for direct democracy. We can shadow the person that is elected. And we've got something called block vote, which is a marvellous tool. And there's several of us, including Monty here in the room as well. We post up votes on there, and it can be for your ward, for your town, for your constituency, and for the country. Even this one, you can put it for the world. And you can actually get a result from the people in your area. People have to sign up for it, right? But it didn't cost anything. Just need to prove that you live in that postcode. When your votes are there, you can go to the elected person and say, Andrew, I live in your area. There's a vote next week in Parliament on this, whatever it is, right? I've tested the people out there already. You won't get everyone to vote, but you can say out of the sample, 70% said they didn't like it and they don't want it to go ahead. And then Andrew goes in Parliament and says 70% of my people said no, I say no. Yeah? And if they don't, the next vote will be, should we get a new MP? Yeah? It will work for itself. This is what they do in the cantons.
When, I've said many times in Parliament and speaking engagements that when the people are scared of the politicians, which is where we are now, and you feel that Parliament is inflicting laws upon you, that is tyranny. But when the politicians are scared of the people, that's democracy, and that's where we've got to get to. And for us to win, the people are going to have to wake up to what's been perpetrated against them.
We've also got to educate the police, because they're the brown shirts of the government these days.
Police, the courts. Now, when the vast majority of people realise what's been perpetrated against them and could be done in the future if we sign up to this WHO nonsense, there's going to be a huge appetite for change because they won't want a system that's let them down so badly. And we've got to offer that hope that this is a better system which really puts the people in control, which is direct democracy. So they go hand in glove. We've got to win, we've got to wake people up, and then there'll be an appetite that we can't have this system that's allowed this to happen. We can't allow this to happen again. On the WHO question about, well, I raised it in the WHO debate, that if anybody wants really to stop the next pandemic, since it was created in a lab, and the WHO had the ability to do so and refused to do so, surely finding out who thought up creating COVID-19, prosecuting the people who funded it, who authorised it, and the labs that created it, bringing all those people to account is the best way of ensuring that it doesn't happen again. But of course the WHO didn't want to do that because they know exactly where it's come from and they just don't want us to know, so they'll be scared to death the next time they reach it. And as far as it's all about how do we get the message out, the media is changing. Belief in the main legacy media, the TV. I mean, I've not watched television in 9 months. I don't speak it on because it's pure propaganda. I'm not interested. My life feels a lot better. I don't buy newspapers. My own social media footprint, which was measured a few weeks ago, the average over the previous 8 weeks I have 20.24 million interactions a week with 600,000 direct interactions. That's 600,000 likes or comments on my social media posts a week. Which newspaper has got that?
Yeah.
And how many of Andrew Bridgen's? There's quite a lot out there. That's the way it's going. That's the way it's going.
Eric Spence. I have a concern about the direct democracy process. I think it's dry. I think it's talking about a process. It doesn't really have a strategy. I think you need to focus on issues within a referendum process and use that as an example of direct democracy. I was involved in Australian referenda. I was involved in UKIP and 2016. I've followed the Irish referendum in the last 3 months, and there's another referendum somewhere else recently, which is also relevant, and I've been following that. Now, what the Australian referendum recently showed was that it was raised by the Australian Labor Party. The strongest federal seat in Australia voted against that referendum by 70-odd%. I'm very proud to say that the name of that electorate is my surname. I had nothing to do with it, but it was the poorest electorate, the lowest asset base in the country, and it cleaned up on the referendum. The people who voted for it the most were the bureaucrats in Canberra. They 70% in favour. The affluent rich in the wealthiest electorates in Peppermint Grove in West Australia, all the rich people lived there, and they voted in favour because they thought it was a good thing. And I think the recent Irish referendum, where Varadkar tried to get rid of women as an entity, says it all. And fortunately he's gone, and I hope the tribe have gone with him. I think you need to focus on specific issues. Yes, immigration is a huge issue. Put that to the people. I put out a referendum in the last couple of months across a range of people about that Newcastle United football fan lady who's been banned from Newcastle United for her views on trans. And I put out a totally bland statement, not trying to go for one side or the other. And I ran it in a cafe in Millhouses, and a women's table, a men's table. I took it around the whole room. It was 100% support for it. And that's not reflected in the political process. So I think you do have to get people emotionally involved. And talking about the process is dry and boring. So you've got to apply it. And I'm delighted to see someone in Reform is just saying, if we get a seat or we do this, we will have a referendum on emissions, the emissions issue. And I think the pros and cons, I would welcome that. Paul, from Not a Lot of People Know That, has put that up on his website in the last couple of days. I've been trying to put up a referendum process on his website for the last 2 years, and he's refused to do it. So Cameron handled the referendum process very badly. I think I know how to handle the referendum process, having been through it 4 or 5 times now directly. And yes, the Swiss model is the concept, but I think it's too bland and it doesn't appeal to people's emotions. I think you've got to get emotional about it.
It's the vaccine injuries, that's how you get them.
Yeah, I agree with you. See, what we're doing is taking an idea that no one knew about a year ago and trying to make 50, 60 million people around this country know about it as an idea. But the ones who are going to do it are Andrew putting things on his leaflets about direct democracy, are the Reform people putting in there about particular issues. Now, what I've always advised is, when I started looking at this, I'd go round a small constituency, I'd knock a bunch of doors, 10 here, 10 there, 10 other, I'll find out what the issues are that are they concerning them locally. So I find out, is it the bins, is it the potholes, what's the priority? And then you create 3 votes, 4 block vote, which Alan's explained, so that you have that. so that you have then the emotional issues that were resonating locally would go on to block vote. So that's what we advise, but we're not doing it because we're apolitical, you might say, but we can advise. This is what we would suggest. So as you say, find out what the ones are that are going to get people motivated, as you say, to go out the door and get emotionally involved. And then do that. But, you just got to go out and knock a few doors and find out, objectively. You might think this or that, but it doesn't mean you're right. Do you know what I mean? We're all individuals with our own issues. But when you go around 3 different parts of your ward or around your constituency, you find out what they are. You find out what those hot button issues are, and then you create questions around them. Do you want this resolved? Yes or no? Do you want another surgery in our town, whatever it might be? So yeah, I agree with you entirely. Thanks, but that's for you guys. In reform, in independence. You guys, and that's what Monty's doing. He's doing it now. That's happening. So thank you very much. I agree with you.
Please take a look at Blockdog. If you want to know more about it, come and talk to one of us afterwards. It's brilliant.
What I would say is that the establishment hate following the Brexit referendum result, which wasn't what they wanted. The establishment hate the thought of the people having referendums. They will resist it immensely. Now, I spoke in the Dáil in the Irish Parliament about 6-7 weeks ago. Ireland's a special situation. They have something called the Crotty ruling. That was, I think, from 1983, which means that anything that affects their sovereignty, they have to have not only a referendum on it, but they have to have a full public debate. And that's half of it for me. It's not just the fact that you have a referendum, that's good. It's that you have to have a full public debate, and all the aspects of any issue have to be explored. And that's why Ireland, they're pretty good rebels, really. They were always terrible for us. They're pretty good rebels, and they might actually be. That's the reason. The week before I was there in Dublin speaking in their parliament, the Director General of the WHO was there trying to get them to smooth it out so they don't have to have Crotty implemented. Because otherwise, what we'll have is the debate and the votes in Ireland will decide those two important WHO. And I'm pushing. I think the Irish might come through for us, and we've got to pray for that one. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lynn Irving from Love, Liberation, Opportunity, Vitality, Empowerment. I've got a question on inalienable rights. How does the direct democracy cope with that? Because you could just turn it into bullying by people. So if the Swiss decided that everybody should have a vaccine, what does that mean? We need these protected way before we get to referenda. We need the inalienable rights.
You can't sign away inalienable rights.
But people have been forcing, mandating.
Yeah.
So if what you need is inalienable rights protected in
Yes.
law before, they're obviously inalienable in our rights and you can't take them away. But that doesn't stop the thuggery that is recent judiciary trying to do that for us. And Andrew, are you fully on board with inalienable rights? Because I don't know precisely because I wasn't watching the TV before the whole COVID thing. But a lot of MPs, and I think you were one of them, did not oppose the legislation for tyranny, for what I think is tyranny, and basically agreed to suppress our rights to move around, to meet each other, to have a family life.
I voted against everything after the second lockdown.
Right. So I'm hoping now that you can say there is no circumstance in which inalienable rights should ever be.
I can't see any circumstances where, given the experience we've all had, and what we need is the Hallett Review to do a proper job, not go in there already deciding what they're going to find. The only question is we didn't lock down hard enough. It's absolutely ludicrous. That is completely discredited. And we had a perfectly reasonable pandemic response that had been built up over decades that was thrown in the bin, and mysteriously, so did every other country in the world, and they all, apart from Sweden, adopted a lockdown policy. And whichever way you look at it, Sweden's outcomes from all of that were considerably better than ours. But no one wants to look at Sweden, do they?
Yes. So my gripe with many people like Tice and Farage and Galloway is that they have at some point decided that our body autonomy or that our rights to free movement or something like that were not worth or should be trampled on. And I don't mind that people make mistakes, but there's been no sort of then recognition, no contrition,
No, but God
sort of
does with a
atonement.
sinner who's repented and seen
Yeah,
the light.
have they
There has to be
actually-
a ability to repent, else we're going to be very
absolutely.
lonely.
So has there been that from Farage, from Tice, from yourself? Has there been a revelation of oh my God, we must never ever trample human rights again, trample inalienable rights again? Has there been that?
Absolutely.
That
And
Damascus
also
moment?
what was done to the children to protect adults. Any society that sacrifices its children's well-being to protect old people is fundamentally deeply sick in itself.
Forcing mandates on NHS on vaccine. Has Tice ever apologised for forcing vaccine mandates?
I can't speak for Mr. Tice. I have no wish to.
Excuse me, but there's something in the Public Health 1984 Act to Control Disease. And I think it's section 43E, and it states quite categorically, no one can be required to have medical intervention. Medical intervention includes vaccination and prophylactics.
That's the Nuremberg Code and Helsinki Code. But what I'll
Yeah,
tell
but
you,
it's actually
if
in this
these
Act
two
of
instruments go through our parliament, they're going to go through all the other parliament, these two WHO instruments, the lockdowns will be that severe, the mandates, the vaccines untested in 90, 100 days, mRNA forced on people. I mean, and that's no accountability whatsoever. I mean, we're looking at something far worse than we had during, which was intolerable when you look back on it, and against the science during our pandemic response and the pandemic response around the world. But that is nothing to what will be inflicted on us if we allow these two instruments from the WHO. And of course, the weak politicians we've got around the world, they're going to say, well, it's an international agreement and it's a pandemic and we're not really doing to you, but they are. They're going to inflict that upon you, just blame it on Tedros, who's not accountable and not elected. But that's the big danger. It's far worse than you've seen so far.
Yeah, I mentioned you've got to have courage, all right? That's the number one quality in life. If you haven't got that, you can be forced into any of these things. That's the issue. So you've got to be prepared to stand up and be counted. This whole movement is about standing up, and getting counted, okay? So doing it peacefully, okay, and lawfully. That's how we do it with direct democracy. If they come out and they're treating us like this, they try it once more, then, all bets might be off. People might start saying, that's it, we've had enough of you guys. This is the reality. That's what they have to understand. They have to understand that not all of us are supine, okay? This whole process is a warning. It's a saying to them, look guys, this is the lawful way to deal with it, and this is what we deserve as a people. If we vote for it, that's it, we damn well get it. That's why it's one vote away. Lord Sumption made the point that the 2010 Parliamentary Act says that if you have just the House of Commons can vote through now constitutional change. One vote. They can make that change. The Constitution is very pliable. So what we need are people in there, Andrew, Reform, other people, who are going to drive this. If we don't have that, and they try and drive this through, which they might well do, then you better be prepared to stand up and be counted. That's it. Look, we lost, 800,000 men in World War I, went over the top for us. If we're not prepared to just go down and protest every damn day outside the Parliament when they try this rubbish, we get what we deserve. This is the reality. We've got to be prepared to stand up for what's right when they're coming after us. That's it.
No is a very small word, but it's got a huge meaning if enough of us say it. And we've just got to say, no, we're not accepting this. It's not a way we want to live our lives. It's not acceptable in a democracy. And just say no. Not comply.
Coming back 10 minutes ago now to when you were talking about how to possibly dementia setting in here, promote direct democracy to people. One thing that you've not mentioned, but it's been overlooked or you just haven't put it to one side tonight, is we all know so many people at elections who turn around and say, what's the point in voting? The Tories will get in, or Labour, and they're the people we need to target with the message that this is actually worth going for, so that their voice will actually count it. And a good example is the last local election in Barnsley. There's 180,000 people on the electoral roll. Only 50,000 people voted, and so Labour got in again. And if those other 130,000 people had just come to the booth and voted for an independent, there wouldn't be a Labour council in Barnsley now. You know, or we're spending 10 million on a stupid bridge, or, you know, stupid little things like that. So that we need to get the message to those people who don't see the point in voting anymore, that there will be a point in voting. So it is very, very important, let's face it, very important that Reform UK do pick this up and push this as one of their top messages over immigration and everything else. Because the only chance we've got of getting rid of Conservative and Labour is by getting Reform UK in.
It's by getting independence, and we don't need somebody. Nobody needs.
I
I don't need someone from London telling me how to run my town. He was out of there, right? So Richard Tay stood in my town in 2019, the last general election. He was out of the town faster than he got there. He's never been back since. Yet he's going to come up because we were a high Brexit vote, and he thinks he's going to take my town. He's not going to shorten the GP waiting list. He's not going to sort out the education. He's not going to sort out the town hall. He's going to do nothing but sound bites. And he is not. And I don't understand.
Order.
The Honourable Lady's made a short term party that has got a captain health chance of getting rid of red and blue at the next election is Reform.
Can we please, order.
We need 650 people from their own town for the blueprint.
Can I sort of address your point, really? As a Reform councillor, and my colleague here is also a Reform councillor, we share your concerns over our leader, but we are all individuals. There is no whip. Now,
He's a normal bloke, right?
My colleague is talking to Richard Tice about his attitude towards a number of issues, but particularly the COVID situation, and he has been getting through to him. So, but we are on a different planet to Richard Tice, but it doesn't matter. So what we are, we're like an umbrella. We're like an umbrella of independence. That's what we are. So you're voting for an individual, not for Richard Tice. Now, the good thing about Reform is that there are lots of people who aren't like us. So how do we get to those thousands of people? You could do, that's fine, like Ashfield Independence or whatever. But what Reform does, it's got a better public image, if you like, for normal voters that get frightened in voting for something different.
He's a Tory boy with money.
Yeah, but he's...
Sam, can you let him speak, please?
Yeah,
We listen to you, love. Let's listen to him.
He's just the leader of the party. We're on the ground doing work, and we're not. We're both working class people, as most Reform members are. I'll tell you something. On Sunday, was it Monday?
It's a bit like the Queen, is just a figurehead.
Yeah, he's just a figurehead, and he's not going to last. There's going to be change at the top. But anyway, I'll give you an example. On Sunday or Monday, this last couple of days, some of us went and took a house back after the owners were evicted by the police, and they had 12 immigrants as security in the house and outside. So about 80 of us went and broke down the barriers and took the house back. I'm a Reform member doing that. So one of the members came from Kent, and he heard me talking about Reform, and he said, "Oh, Delport, I'm Reform." Right, so we got talking. So so that's Reform. That's not Richard Tice. Wouldn't expect him to do that. But these are normal Reform members, okay, who are working for the people, for the community. So now we've got, And we support you. We support you. And I fully understand what you're saying about Hartlepool, because I think we would agree it was a bit pathetic. But that's not us. So you've got to look at the individuals. But there's a benefit to the with the party for all those people that don't really take an interest in politics like we do, but they see reform as an opposition, a reasonable opposition, and that they can embrace without being frightened of extremism. Because I'm an extremist. Right? Now, there's another thing as well. While I've got this microphone, and once I start, it's difficult to stop me. Now, in the East Midlands, I don't know if you know, we've got this appalling combined authority business, which is EU regional government. And it's a great opportunity to get through to people because we have a vote on May the 2nd. Only about, 4% of the population even knows it's going ahead. And people say to, well, what's it all about? Why haven't we been told about it? Why haven't we had any chance to talk about it? Well, they have. But there was a consultation, and out of 2.2 million, they had 4,800 respondents. And most of them voted against having a mayor for the East Midlands. But that was rode roughshod over, and we're still going ahead with it. But that's a great opportunity to get on the bandwagon of direct democracy and be saying to people, look, if we had direct democracy, we could have a referendum on it, what we should be doing. So we're fighting that. Richard Tice isn't interested in that because I talked to him 2 years ago, well, a long time ago, about it. But he's not interested, but we are, we're fighting it.
I saw him about a few weeks ago.
Phil, we're supporting you anyway as an independent.
There's a question.
Yeah, and these guys over the Love Party, we support them as well.
I think we've started to break down a bit here. Okay, we had wanted questions and answers.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so I think if we all take a break now, if you want to, go to the bar, take a.
Can I make one very quick point in answer to?
Which one make it directly to us?
I was just going to say that.
Do it now, do it now.
We took over it down. In
Call break, that's okay. 10 minutes, please. If you can get a drink.
Okay, thank you for that. I think Andrew was going to give us a short verse on his banjo, and then we'll, if there are any other questions that are still pending, can we please do it through the chair rather than get into this line across. So I'll hand over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, John. So, how are we going to promote direct democracy? Well, Neil's kindly written a page for my campaigning website, and I think it's really important. I said to you earlier that when people realise what the current so-called democratic system has inflicted upon them and their families, there's going to be a huge appetite for something new, and we've got to have a message of hope. We've got to not just tell people about the problems, we've got to actually have solutions, and I think this is the best reasonably thought out solution that we can have to ensure that what's been perpetrated against the people in the name of democracy is never allowed to happen again. Before I sit down and we answer a few more questions, I would just like to ask you that anyone here tonight who wants to come down during the election campaign or even before and help me get re-elected in North West Leicestershire, if you go onto my campaign website, it's bridgen.uk. You can sign on there to come down and help with the leaflets delivery or even on the online campaign. And I can guarantee you it'll be well worth coming down. You'll like North West Leicestershire, and we are in with a very good chance of beating the Uni Party. If we can't beat them in North West Leicestershire, all hope will be lost, and I won't allow all hope to be lost, I promise you. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Events like that are a really good opportunity to network with other independent people around the country. And I've seen a little bit of that here tonight as well, so well done everybody.
I'll just say one thing quickly if I can. Some people have not been that clear on what direct democracy is. This is some of the feedback. So
direct democracy is based around the major issue is referendums. So
Microphone.
oh, sorry. The major issue is referendums. That you can have mandatory referendums on things that the people will decide what those are. So big constitutional concerns that you've got at national level, or constitutional concerns you might have at lower level. So you can use direct democracy and the referendum in particular as a mandatory referendum that has to be called when you have a constitutional change, or you have an optional referendum, which is called when the people see a law coming out of Parliament, and you're then somebody can put forward a proposal that I want to stop this law or I want to amend it. Okay, and that then becomes a document that you can go around and collect signatures. And they collect, in Switzerland, for instance, 1% of the people who are voters on the electoral roll. You have to get 1% of them to sign up to say they want a referendum on that law that's just come out of Parliament, that they want to stop it. When that happens, and if they get the 1% within so many months, it depends, the mandatory one, you don't need to wait. It's just going to happen because it's mandatory. But for the optional one, you need 6 months, 9 months, depending on if you're at local level or national level. And that way, you'll then get a first past the post referendum on that law, so you can stop it. Now, this is all clearly explained, hopefully, in that document there. So get your hands on them. That's the basic one. Yeah.
Can I just interject? The best example of direct democracy that people can get their head around is the Brexit referendum in 2016, where the people got to instruct the government on what they would do with respect to our membership of the EU. That is direct democracy. The people saying through a vote what is going to happen and the government doing it. Whether the government have actually done it, you can argue the toss about it. Direct democracy is that process of the people making a decision.
Yeah, but the bottom line is you can do it under the system that we're proposing, like the Swiss do, where it's mandatory to hold them on constitutional and important issues that you'll decide as the people what those should be, and then you can do the optional referendum on every single piece of legislation coming out of Parliament. If you can get enough signatures, that's not going to happen. It's going to happen occasionally. You're going to get referendums on things that people find are emotive issues. That's what will happen. In Switzerland, it was mosque minarets or things like that, burgers, and then people can call for a referendum. Now, the kind of the final thing, as I say, in terms of the referendums, is you can call them on your own. You could decide, Thomas, you want a law on this or that, and you put a proposal together. You go around and you get 2% of the electorate's signatures, and that will then give you the right to a referendum on that. And in Switzerland, for instance, there's quite a low success rate with those, but for all of them, I think it's about 13% are voted through as laws, that's all. So they get the right to the referendum, but they generally fail. But the bottom line is it keeps them on their toes. See, these people in Parliament, when they know that every single law could be stopped because you have the right to call a referendum, that is probably the main check on them. They know, Reform will talk to the Greens, the Greens will talk to Labour, whatever, because they've all got to come up. They all know if we don't get this right, they'll call a referendum on it, and we spend all this time and effort. And not only that, if we keep putting ropey laws out there, we're not getting re-elected, are we? Yeah. And what you find is the people who are generally over there, the MPs in Switzerland, as I say, they're only working 12 weeks of the year. Most of them have got a job. The issue is that these are not Eton guys. Huh? These are people who are members of the community, and they are going there to work for 12 weeks of the year. The rest of the time, they're generally a lawyer, a policeman, whatever. Some union official, whatever. They're all working. They get on the bus after they come out of Parliament. See, this is what we're looking for. It's genuine people who want to help their community. And you get it with direct democracy. And also, we've got, for instance, in UK now, in terms of, we've got the right to recall politicians now. But it's only when they messed up publicly. But with direct democracy, you could say, we put them down there, figures that we're suggesting, they're not following the Swiss example. The rest of it follows the Swiss example.
The recall was, I think John wanted to get rid of all the MPs, so we put some quite easy ways of doing that. I'm only joking, but the bottom line is, you should be able to get rid of your MP fairly straightforwardly, because they're not going to go. If they're doing a good job, you're not going to want to get rid of them. If they're just going there doing what the people want, why would you recall them? Unless they've had some major.
It makes their
personal
job easier as well.
So I think it's a better way. It's a more collegiate method of getting people to discuss political answers inside Parliament and coming out with better laws. Okay, and that's why they only need to work 12 weeks of the year, because they're just banging them out. Thank you very much, and they're going off to their proper job. That's it. But in the meantime, they're doing what they think is a good thing for their community. And a lot of this is down at the lower level. The local government gets a lot more power. As I said, the whole education system is like we used to have it in Britain, where it's more local. And we used to send a lot of people to Oxbridge from grammar schools and state schools, and they got in. They didn't need special rights to get in because they were well educated, because it was done at the local level and the people had control over the education system. If we get that again, then we can start applying pressure on the whole education system. Everything is centralised, everything is globalised, and this is all planned. You can go back. Funnily enough, I did speak to a teacher, and he was explaining to me that back in the 80s, we started picking up the American system with the education for the state schools. These are the processes that were introduced. You've got to go back over a century. You go back to Carnegie and his foundations on education. It all sounds great, but the centralisation of schooling means these people, they want people who are going to come out of there, they're going to be factory fodder or cannon fodder. They're going to get the young guys are going to be sent off as cannon fodder, and the rest are going to be in the factory as factory fodder. They don't want you thinking independently. They don't want Sam. They don't want reform people. They don't like them. They don't want people, Andrew in particular, 1 in 650. They don't want this. The aim is to ensure that the education systems around the world ensure they get compliant people who are fearful. Fearful. This is why I say you've got to have courage. It's the most important quality. So we all got to fess up, as they say in America, don't they? Stand up, look them in the eye, and take them on. Now, we'll take some knocks, in terms of, I'm not talking physically, I'm talking about we've got to be prepared. Look at J.K. Rowling. She's got courage. She's got a lot of money. What's she going to be doing with this thing in Scotland? She may get banged up. It's 7 years, but she's going to stand up. And we can't just rely on J.K. Rowling and Andrew and a few others. We've all got to be doing it. This is what direct democracy is about. To get it, you are right. We're fighting the biggest machinery out there. So that's direct democracy. Hopefully that's a bit clearer. But, as I say, have a look at that one pager, because this is what Nigel was handing out around Brighton and getting a lot of good response. Green councillors. Green councillors we've had Momentum, Labour people. They're all looking at this now and they're calling for referendums and this type of thing down in Brighton. So this is local government. You can push it, you can get alliances. That's what I'm saying. It's about allies. The idea's time has come, really. Fortunately for us, someone else has done all the work. They've been doing this 176 years now. 176 years. They're not stupid. Okay? They have the best education system, they reckon, in the world. That's it. Because it's all run locally. 26 different cantons, and the centralised ones are worse. Look at the American education system. It's not famous for its, perfection, is it? But the Swiss have got 26 different cantons, all split up. I think that's the lesson, guys, is that, we go local, you take control, because your politicians have to face you and have to be responsible to you, and you can call them to account. They don't do it now, do they? What accounting is there? Oh, you vote once every 4 or 5 years? Thank you very much. I don't think so. Those days are over. Otherwise, we'll be on the road to perdition. And that's direct democracy. Thank
you. Does anyone have any burning questions regarding direct democracy or anything else that they would like to put forward?
There's a few things keep me up at night, and one of them is all of these things seem to be happening all at the same time, and they're all burning issues. They're all real serious issues. Why do you think that they're happening all at the same time?
Well, they're not only happening all at the same time in this country, but they're happening all at the same time all over the world. I've made contact with some very brave Australian senators who are pretty awake to what's going on. And, you know, how depressed am I when they say that we've got the drag acts going into our schools in Australia exactly the same as they're brainwashing the children over here. The powers that be have decided that it's about power, it's about control, it's about dumbing down Western society, and that includes Australia and New Zealand. And they've decided that, you know, a badly educated, impoverished, ill, and scared population are just far easier to control. It's one body blow after another. You know, every time I used to watch the television, especially Sky News and things like that, it was, you know, the climate crisis, the Brexit crisis, the immigration crisis, the sterling crisis, whatever. Everything's a crisis. Now, I came into government to sort people's problems out for them, to make life better for my constituents in North West Leicestershire. I thought the principle of government was that we look at the problems facing the world and the nation, and we get on with sorting them so you can get on with your lives. But that isn't happening anymore. Everything is pushed onto the people. And it's, you know, then we end up in a situation after the lockdowns and everything else that's been pushed at our young people, that now we've got 1 million under 25s in need of mental health support. Yeah, it's part of a strategy to destabilise our society. Well, all I'm saying is it's happening all over the world at the same time, isn't it?
This is the thing that's keeping me up at night. Who are they?
Who are they?
Well,
their representatives would appear to be, you know, the World Economic Forum and Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab and George Soros. They're pushing this agenda with a lot of money, but I don't think it's them. I think they're the front guys for some entity beyond that, which I don't think they would
be. So you think there is an entity?
I think there's a group of people who are extremely rich, who we don't even know their names. I don't think it's just Gates and Schwab and this lot. I think they're just the front men for them.
I call them the dark power.
Let's just call them the deep state.
Actually,
Yeah.
David Martin,
Right.
all these people that are behind it. Peter Dash is one of them.
Right.
There's 36 of them
If you-
behind all this. David Martin
If you-
did the video.
If you want to learn a lot about it, you can get it in my book. And I'm not doing that just to sell it. I'm telling you because I researched this deeply, and I looked at America because that is the home of most of this. Because I was actually 2 years as an exchange officer in the U.S. intelligence over in Washington D.C. So I can't talk about that for obvious reasons. But you know, I was 16 years in intelligence with the British Army. I served in lots of places around the world. So you know, I assess things and analyse them. So when you get that book, you'll find this an analysis of all of these issues. Because, you know, when I was in the army, I was proud to be in the army. I was very happy to do so, and I thought NATO was a good thing because we're, you know, battling the Soviet Union. But of course, you then find out when you leave, NATO continues. You have these long wars, selling, you know, expensive kit. To, you know, 80 billion are left behind. That's just left behind. What else was in there? You know, in Afghanistan. They cut and run after a long, expensive war, in which even the intelligence, you know, contractors were making billions every year. Billions. Okay? This is the reality. The military-industrial complex, you know, we're all told about it by Eisenhower, 1961, okay, in January. And he gave his farewell address after 2 terms as president. You can go and look up a book called The Brothers as well, like the Dulles brothers, the guys who ran the CIA, and the State Department of the United States during the 1950s. And those guys, prior to that, had been the top lawyers for the global companies of their era. And they set up most of the contracts with Nazi Germany, but it wasn't Nazi when they first went in there. But the Sullivan and Cromwell was the largest legal company in the United States. And the Dulles brothers, Alan Dulles, who ended up being head of the CIA, and his brother, John Foster Dulles, was the State Department, he was head of the State Department. These 2 guys they were rabid Christians. They were very righteous in their beliefs, and they thought everybody else was the enemy. and especially if they were going to make some money out of it. So these guys, are the type of people who they were representing the moneyed interests. They made fortunes, but nothing like the ones who they were working for. These were two lawyers, and there's another guy, Buckminster Fuller, and he explained that he called it lawyer capitalism. Okay, and these people have taken over the global interest, and now I think in 2015 it was a technical group in Switzerland looked at the global ownership. 30 different companies, this is 2015, owned over 51% of all of the top 300 companies in the world. And those 300 companies all owned thousands of companies beneath them, thousands. So the global interest that you're talking about, and you can talk about the Bank of International Settlements, the Central Bankers Club, based in Switzerland, that is not even, cannot even be shut down by the Swiss. It was specifically written with special laws to protect it in the 1920s and 30s. And the head of it at the time was the Bank of England guy who set it up, head of Montague. And then after him, you ended up with the Germans basically running it as Hitler rose to power. And these guys with Sullivan and Cromwell set up the Nazis with all of their huge funds. And I.G. Farben became famous, for killing millions of Jews because of
Zyklon B.
Zyklon B, exactly. And I.G. Farben, well, who were some of the biggest investors there? Standard Oil. Standard Oil, the largest oil company ever, which was run by the Rockefellers. So you can put names to it, and the Rockefellers are amongst the most influential. They've had many guys running as vice president in the United States. Another responsible to Nelson Rockefeller. He said to Kennedy, it's on record, it's on tape, let's nuke them in Vietnam. That was his answer. Nuke them. These are the types of people you've got. Many of them, this was on the tapes that were found with Nixon and all the rest of it, they were recorded. These are the realities of power, realities of funds that have been generational in their building. And the Rockefellers are the most powerful. The Council on Foreign Relations over in the United States again, the CFR. Okay, when that book came out in the 1960s or early 70s, None Bear called it Treason, I think it was called. And in that book, he spoke about the CFR and identified it as the single most influential advisory group to the presidents. Okay, and they run it. The presidents get told what to do. They don't tell Truman things, they don't tell Eisenhower things. These people get away with it because they own the industrial world.
Question from when you're dealings with the civil servants in Whitehall and the civil servants in the town halls, are you finding that they are pushing you in certain ways? Because it seems that when Labour get into a council, or Tories get into a council, there's a continuity which is needed to keep going between the different parties, but they seem to be running the show. What have you found?
Yes, I think I don't want to be awful, but I mean the quality of elected officials we have at all levels in this country. I mean, at the end of the day, the civil servants are paid an absolute fortune compared to the elected representatives, and they actually regard most of the electoral representatives as rather an irritation. I would say that most elected representatives are incapable of dealing with the civil service as they need to be, because ultimately, actually, although the civil service are always there and are probably on a vastly higher remuneration than elected representatives, it is the elected representatives who are actually responsible for the actions of the civil service. It's not the other way around. And you've all seen Yes Minister, and Yes Minister, of course, means No Minister. As a backbencher, and the only job I was ever offered was by Cameron's government. That was caveated that I was offered a job of Immigration Minister if I would campaign to remain in the European Union. I did say to Cameron, you really hate me, don't you? You want me to be Immigration Minister with no control over immigration. And I said, not for 1 minute. I will be campaigning to leave the European Union, and we will leave. Yeah. And then we did.
Does anyone else have anything else? Yes. Jill.
Yeah.
I'll just say, some might say that there was, thank you. Some might say there was quite a lot of corruption involved in the US presidential election last time. Obviously, I know. Quite preposterous. How can we keep corruption out of these referenda when we get this in, this direct democracy referendum? I mean, surely there'll be all sorts of people trying to cause all sorts of issues with that, you know, postal votes, etc. How can we stop the corruption?
Direct democracy.
But how? People just going.
I know it's new to you because it's just been mentioned tonight, but we're actually working with a partner called Blockbar, and basically the guy that runs it, Richard, has got partners who fund and help him, and it's a brilliant site because you go on their register. I said you have to tell them where you live because obviously these things are relevant to where you live. You know, taking part in votes. And then super users like myself and Monty will set up votes in your area, and then it's for you to go out and get people to vote on it. And we've heard this already over here, and I think this is a great opportunity. People like yourself, you went around, asking for people to vote. If you can get people to register on this, they'll see that there's other organisations actually partners on there, and you can see how they're using it. And what we'll do is then have a vote over a period, like there's a vote coming up soon on this WHO. Now's the time to strike the iron, right? Get the votes out there, get people voting them, and then when it's time for this vote, we can go to all of our MPs, and say, we've tested the people in this area. And right now, the magic thing is they don't know how strong we are. They don't know how many of us are there. But we can show them the results and say, this is an accurate test of the people in your postcode who said they're not interested in this, and then if they don't vote, then we can go to the press. We can say, look, we gave them this information last week. Here's a letter I sent to my MP, and he voted against it, or she voted against it. In my case now, because I'm in whatever. It's a good thing because you can support the vote in the House with the actual evidence, and also if they're not doing it, then we can use block vote to see what the appetite is out there to get somebody else doing the job for you.
Can you say that once it's put on there, it cannot be changed by anybody?
Yeah, we're using blockchain, which I just talked with a gentleman at the back about. And this is what they use in cryptocurrency. Alarm bells, no. There's no cryptocurrency stuff. This is just purely for voting. And basically, we send a coin to your computer, which you then use to vote in this election. It's a yes or no referendum. Later on, we might have to look at multiple choice referendums. But right now, this is what we're doing. And it can't be changed. Once you've done it, it will never be able to be tampered with, which is what you were touching on there. This is what happened in American elections. They got to a certain point, see how far behind they were, they sent everyone home, and when they come back in the morning, there was loads and loads of votes that got them past the line. That can't happen with this. And we know that the people in that area, and this is a great thing, they don't have to be on the electoral register, because it's about who lives in that area, not who's on paying council tax. Yeah. So a lot of these people who actually have a beef with some of the issues that are going on in their area, it's a great opportunity for them to have a say in what's going on in their area. Question?
Where's the information on what we can take away from?
If you can get in touch with any of us, I sent an email around a couple of weeks ago, which was found to be quite useful. It's on the charts as well, and we'll send that on to you. And you can have a look at exactly how it works, because I've put up some of mine and Monty's votes, which we've had results on already, which is very, very good. Question? Sorry, at the back there.
Yeah, okay, it's here, and on here as well.
I'm chairman of my local parish council. I have interviewed Richard about this, and I put it on my next agenda. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how it can be used locally. Like I say, as a parish council, what kind of questions can it be used as, like?
How can block vote be used for asking different questions? You can use this if you want to find out if you want to introduce a new rota in your shared house to use a bathroom. It is really that useful. Once you set yourself up as a super user, You can set a referendum and then tell everyone to vote on it, and you don't need to go and like badger them about it, because you can say you've got to vote answers in a week. Have you got a comment on that?
Yeah. So I am an expert in blockchain. I've been building blockchains for many years. Technically, a blockchain does not have any super users, and that's the whole point. They are totally, utterly decentralized and fully transparent. So when a blockchain is built well, anybody who votes on it, their vote is can be verified by absolutely anybody in the world. It cannot be changed. It's immutable, right? And as long as the system's set up well, you could use it for any purpose. I built blockchains where we were building voting systems in the third world, in countries we'd never even been, to reward people for performing acts in their local communities. And people around the world were voting on things. So you can use it for anything. But if it's built well, the blockchain is the perfect voting system.
Oh, thank you for endorsing the blockchain. This is new to us, as we said, so this is how we've done it. You know, I don't know what it will look like, but we can't have 170 people in one constituency all posting the same question on the same subject. So this is how we've managed it, but that might change. I don't know. We'll have to look at that as we go along. Yeah. Richard obviously isn't here this evening to answer the questions, but he'll take a call from you. He'll answer emails. He's really, really good, and he's completely 100% invested in all of this. Joel.
My question isn't really to the panel, it's to the room. I'm standing this May for Sheffield Council in Woodhouse Ward, and I'm basically wondering, well, yes, for a reform. Anyone in here interested in helping with the campaign? And also, I do need a proposer and seconder a bit last minute with it. Been working a lot on things. Yeah, basically come and speak to me after this, and might be a councillor in a month. There we go.
I've got a question for you. Are you interested in helping Joel? Put your hand up. This is direct democracy in action. Yeah?
Oh, anyone else wants to stand as well? We barely have any candidates. There's so little organisation in any sort of right-wing populist, any sort of anti-establishment organisation. It's just so little organisation.
Speak to Joel afterwards.
Let's get some more paper candidates. All you need to do is sign a few forms. You don't even have to have your address published. If you live or work in Sheffield, you can stand as a candidate. The deadline is this Friday. Come speak to me. Let's get it sorted.
I wish Joel was on board with us, to be honest, rather than on the phone. Question?
I'm a candidate in Walkley for Heritage. We need to talk to
I
each
messaged
other.
your leader. I messaged Chris came last week. How do we cooperate?
Yes.
Like I said earlier, networking, that's what we need. Yeah?
Excellent.
Any questions? Not statements, Joel.
Can anybody vote on this vote? Do you need a phone or computer?
Yes. It's set up on computer at the moment, but this is something that we have to look at later on further down the line, because obviously there's people who don't use the internet, people who can't get to the internet. But think about this. If we could get people to have access to the internet, it would save closing down all these schools for a day when we have an election or a referendum, yeah? And all the aggro that goes on with that, because all the counting and everything's done electronically, and it's completely safe, it's tried and tested, yeah?
Well-built blockchain will allow you to proxy your vote to someone else.
Or you could go to the library via your email, because you get the kind of email, I'm assuming, and do it that way.
I'm thinking about those people that aren't sort of like technically proficient, and don't have computers, don't have mobile phones, that perhaps might want to vote.
Yeah, that's obviously going to be dealt with. You have to have a paper alternative. But this is we're talking about. Ideally, you can use this system and you can use paper. A lot of people don't want to use any form of technical for all kinds of reasons. So I think we're going to wrap it up here, actually. Because we'd like to see people talk amongst themselves again and actually get to cross-fertilise your ideas or your networks. So I think unless you've got any major point that's earth-shaking, John's going to wrap it up.
I only do it because I get the last word. I just wanted to, I was going to talk quite historically about what's wrong with this country And as someone in here said to me tonight, the problem is we're old enough to remember how it used to be, and we can obviously contrast and compare. But I think one of the main things for me anyway is the fact that, do we have a democracy in this country? Because for me, party politics robs you of democracy. Even if you were to convince your MP to vote in a particular way, they go down to Westminster and then they're whipped to vote the way the party wants them to vote. So that to me is not democracy, it never will be. It's the system that's really the problem here. All of the parties offer to change one set of people for another set. Not direct democracy. And the game is rigged. It's been rigged for a long time. You're kicking uphill all the time. We're against a massive machine. You've no idea how deep this machine goes, and we're against it. And it is, as has been said by several speakers tonight, that it's going to be a big bang. But we've got to have it. If we don't have it now, our children or grandchildren are going to have it. And to be fair, I mean, this has happened on our watch. We're responsible for this mess. So it's our mess to clear up. And that's what we're trying to do. Many of our MPs, they're elected under a representative system. But they don't represent us. They behave more like delegates, with all the power to just choose what they want. They don't represent us anymore.
Sure, but we've got to go because we've got to catch a train. So I'll say good night to you quick.
It's going to run late, you know that, don't you? It's going to run late.
Anyway, to get back, I think they behave more like delegates than they do in terms of representing us, and that's got to stop. You know, we're the people of this country, and we can stop it, but we've got to work together, and we've got to get off our backsides and do something, like we did in the referendum, and we made that work. I also look at what's happening in Parliament, and I look at some of the decisions that are made, and I can't understand them. And I don't think I'm particularly fit. I can't understand them at all. But it occurred to me that if people make a decision that you can't understand, it's usually because they've got a different agenda to you. It's not that they're thick, they're fine with their agenda, but you don't know what it is. So you can't possibly understand why these decisions are made. I suppose the next thing really is, will DD change this? Well, it will. It will give power back to the people. It will make us work together for something better. And it will give us the opportunity to do that. And that's why I'm supporting direct democracy, as I am. It's the only viable way that we're going to change the system. And it is the system that's wrong. Don't make any misunderstandings about this. It's not so much the politicians, it's the system in getting them in there that's wrong. And we've got to change it. And we can do that. Just the last couple of comments. If any of you can, help Andrew in any way at all to get him over the line. That will help the DD cause immensely. So if any of you can, leafleting, driving around, manning stalls, talking to people, whatever whatever it might be, if you can do anything, please get in touch with him. He's travelled a long way to be here tonight, to give us the benefit of his knowledge and his information. And I think the least we could do is do a little bit back for him.
Can we ask how we get in touch with them?
And finally, I would like to just thank the speakers who've all done well tonight, even what's his name? So it just remains for me really to thank everyone of you for attending, and it's you that's made this meeting possible, and it will be you that will make direct democracy possible if you get behind it. Thank you very much.
Before you all rush off, if we can have a few photographs taken.